The old woman looked at my hands before she looked at my face. That was the first thing I noticed. Not the house. Not the marble steps. Not the white columns standing in front of the Ashford estate like they had been placed there to remind ordinary people where ordinary people were allowed to stop. It was her eyes. They went straight to my hands. The cracked skin around my knuckles. The black grease that never fully came out from under the nails. The small burn scar across my thumb from a carburetor fire 20 years earlier. Then she looked at my boots. Then my coveralls. Then finally, almost reluctantly, at me. Her name was Eleanor Whitcomb. 74 years old. Widow of Charles Whitcomb, one of the richest men in coastal Georgia. Mother of one daughter. Owner of a house that had more rooms than my entire street had mailboxes. She stood on the front steps in a pale silk blouse, one hand resting on a silver cane, and said the sentence that should have made me turn around and leave. Fix my husband's Bentley, Mr. Lawson, and maybe I'll let you marry my daughter. She did not smile. That was the worst part. It was not a joke. It was a test wrapped in cruelty. A rich woman looking down at a mechanic and offering him an impossible prize she believed was too far above him to even insult properly. The lawyer beside her looked away. The housekeeper standing behind the door lowered her eyes. I stood there in my faded blue coveralls, holding my tool bag, and for 1 second I was 30 years old again, standing behind a restoration shop in Savannah, watching a young woman named Caroline Whitcomb cry because her mother had decided people like me were mistakes families were supposed to correct. Eleanor did not recognize me. Of course she did not. 22 years can change a man. Grief can change him more. Back then, I was lean, hopeful, and foolish enough to believe love could outrun a family name. Now I was 47, a widower, a father, and the owner of a small classic car shop on the edge of Savannah. But I recognized her. And I knew the daughter she had just used as a punchline. I knew Caroline Whitcomb. I knew the sound of her laugh. I knew the way she used to lean over an open hood and ask real questions about engines, not because she wanted to flatter me, but because she actually wanted to understand. And I knew exactly what her mother had taken from us. I should have left. Instead, I looked toward the carriage house where the Bentley had been sleeping for almost 8 years. Then I said, "I'll look at the car." Eleanor blinked once, as if she had expected anger and disliked receiving control. "Good," she said. "I was told you were competent." "People say many things, ma'am." I followed her around the side of the house. "My name is Marcus Lawson. I fix machines people have already declared impossible. Not new cars. Not plastic dashboards and sensors that need software before they need patience. I mean the old ones. Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Packards, Cadillacs from the 50s with steering wheels big enough to turn a ship, cars built by men who signed their work in the fit of a hinge, the sound of a door closing, the way a carburetor responded to a hand that knew when to stop tightening. My shop is small. Lawson Classic Restoration. Concrete floor. 2 lifts. A wall of old tools my father left me. A radio that plays more static than music. My son, Jonah, is 21. He studies business in Atlanta. He is smarter than I was at his age and less patient with silence, which means he got that part from his mother. My wife, Elise, died 5 years ago. Long illness. Long hospital rooms. Long drives home with the passenger seat empty before she was even gone. Near the end, She said something I did not forgive her for until after I understood it. Marcus, you can rebuild a dead engine from rust, but you let your own son sit across the table from you like a stranger. I told her I was doing my best. She smiled. No, she said. You are doing what is easy for you and calling it your best. After she died, I buried myself in other people's cars. Engines did not ask why you were quiet. Engines did not need you to say you were sorry. Engines only needed patience, pressure, timing, and clean fuel. People were harder. So when the Whitcomb lawyer called me on a Tuesday morning about a 1957 Bentley S1 that had not run since Charles Whitcomb died, I almost said no. Then he said the car had defeated 4 specialists. And then he said the daughter's name by accident. Caroline Whitcomb was expected to visit if the restoration succeeded. That was when I took the appointment. The carriage house was made of old brick and dark timber. It smelled like dust, wax, leather, and money left too long in one place. The Bentley sat beneath a gray cover in the center bay. When I pulled the cover back, I forgot Eleanor was standing there. The car was deep burgundy. Not red. Burgundy, like wine held up to candlelight. Chrome dulled but intact. Leather cracked but honest. A long hood. A silver flying bee at the front, frozen mid-flight. It had the stillness of a thing waiting for the right person to stop making assumptions. Eleanor spoke from the doorway. My husband loved that car more than he loved most living people. I ran my hand along the fender. Maybe it listened better. Her mouth tightened. It stopped running 3 weeks after he died. 4 mechanics told me there was no clear reason. Cars do not stop for no reason. Then find the reason. I will need access to the carriage house. No one watching over my shoulder. You have 3 weeks. I may need less. She gave a dry laugh. So did the last man. I looked at the Bentley and said nothing. The first week told me what the car was not. It was not dead. Compression was strong. Spark was clean. Wiring was old but not ruined. Fuel was present. Carburetors were not clogged. Battery circuit was fine. Starter responded. By every ordinary test, the Bentley should have started. It did not. Not once. It turned. It breathed. It refused. The second week, I stopped trying to force it. That was something my father taught me. A machine that should run and won't is not being stubborn, he used to say. It is telling you the question is wrong. So I changed the question. Not why won't it start? Who made sure it wouldn't? On the 12th day, I found it. A fuel cutoff adjustment hidden behind the front firewall panel. Not broken. Set. A tiny modification made by someone who knew the car intimately. Not enough to look obvious. Just enough to starve the engine at the exact point it should catch. The 4 specialists had missed it because they were looking for failure. I was looking for intention. Charles Whitcomb had disabled his own Bentley. Carefully. Deliberately. Before he died. I sat on the cold carriage house floor for a long time. A man does not silence the machine he loves unless he wants someone to hear what the silence is protecting. So I followed the line deeper. Behind the firewall, in a cavity no mechanic would open during normal service, I found a narrow metal tin wrapped in oilcloth. My hands went still. Written across the top in faded black ink was one name. Caroline. Not Eleanor. Not lawyer. Not estate. Caroline. I did not open it. Some things are not yours just because your hands find them first. That evening, I found Eleanor in the garden room. She was seated near the window with a teacup untouched beside her. I stood at the doorway and said, "Mrs. Whitcomb, is your daughter still in Charleston?" The cup rattled once against the saucer. "Why, I found something in the car. It has her name on it." Her face did not move, but her fingers did. "Give it to me." "No." Her eyes sharpened. "I beg your pardon?" "It was hidden by your husband, in his car, behind a fault he created so someone would one day be forced to find it. Her name is written on it. I will give it to Caroline." Her cane tapped once against the floor. "You work for me, Mr. Lawson." "I work on the car." For a long moment, the room became very quiet. Then Eleanor looked toward the window. My husband was always sentimental where that girl was concerned. "No," I said, before I could stop myself. Maybe he was finally brave. Her head turned slowly. The old version of me would have apologized. The man I had become did not. 3 days later, I found Caroline Whitcomb's number through a collector in Charleston who knew a woman who knew another woman who still invited old families to charity luncheons. When she answered, I almost forgot how to speak. "This is Marcus Lawson," I said. Silence. Long. Complete. Then her voice came back across 22 years. "Marcus?" Just my name. But it carried the summer we lost. The garage. The letters that never arrived. The goodbye forced into a sentence neither of us had wanted to say. "I found something," I said. "In your father's Bentley. She came on Saturday. She was 47 now. Different. Of course she was different. Lines at the corners of her eyes. Gray in her dark hair. A steadiness she had not had at 25. But when she stepped into the carriage house and saw me standing beside the Bentley, she stopped like time had reached out and touched her shoulder. Then she laughed once. Then cried. Then covered her mouth because both feelings had arrived too fast to manage. I placed the tin in her hands. "Your father hid it where only someone repairing the car all the way down would find it." She stared at the name on top. "Did you read it?" "No." She closed her eyes. "Thank you." I stepped outside and left her alone with whatever her father had waited 8 years to say. It took her almost an hour. When she opened the carriage house door, she looked older and lighter at the same time. She told me only part of what the letter said. Charles had written it near the end. He apologized for being a peaceful coward. Those were his words. He wrote that he had watched Eleanor break Caroline's heart years earlier because Caroline had loved a man her mother considered beneath the family. He wrote that he had told himself silence was kindness. That keeping peace in the house mattered more than defending the truth. That he had been wrong. He wrote that he had lost his daughter not in one argument, but in every moment he chose comfort over courage. Then Caroline unfolded a second page. Her hand shook. "Marcus," she said. "He mentioned you by name." I could not move. She read one line aloud. "I do not know if Marcus Lawson will ever forgive this family, but if fate brings his hands to this car, trust them." I did not. For a moment, I heard nothing but the wind moving through the live oaks. Charles Whitcomb had known. All these years, I thought I had vanished from that family like a stain scrubbed from a table. But the old man had known my name. He had known what was taken, and at the end, he had hidden his apology inside the only thing in that house honest enough to wait. Caroline took the letter to her mother. I was not present. That was not my place. But Caroline told me later that Eleanor read the letter twice. The first time standing, the second time sitting. Then she folded it carefully and said nothing for a long while. When she finally spoke, she said the two words Caroline had waited more than 20 years to hear. "I'm sorry." Not beautifully, not warmly. Eleanor Whitcomb did not suddenly become soft. Real people do not change like bad endings rewritten for comfort. But the words were real. And real is more powerful than warm when you have been waiting your whole life for truth. I finished the Bentley the following week. I reset the fuel cutoff, cleaned the lines, balanced the carburetors, changed every fluid, checked every belt, repaired what time had cracked, and left untouched what history had earned. On a bright November morning, I opened the carriage house doors. Eleanor stood at the threshold. Caroline stood beside her. I sat in the driver's seat, placed one hand on the wheel, and turned the key. The Bentley came alive with a deep, smooth breath. Not a roar. Not a shout. A breath. The sound filled the carriage house. Eleanor put one hand on the doorframe. Caroline closed her eyes. And I thought of Charles Whitcomb, a dead man who had turned the machine he loved into a locked letterbox because he had run out of courage while alive. When I stepped out, Eleanor walked toward me. She stood very straight. Then she offered her hand. "I owe you an apology. Mr. Lawson?" I took her hand. She held it longer than I expected. "2 apologies," she said. I knew then she remembered. The summer. The young mechanic. The daughter she took away. "You loved my daughter," she said. "A long time ago, and I ended it." "Yes." She looked at the running Bentley. "My husband trusted your hands more than he trusted mine." I did not know what to say to that, so I told the truth. "He trusted the car." Eleanor almost smiled. Perhaps that was wiser. Caroline and I had dinner a week later. Then again, we did not pretend 22 years could be repaired like a fuel line. We had both lived lives, loved people, lost people, raised children, buried versions of ourselves nobody else would ever meet. But we talked honestly, and that was enough. The bigger repair happened somewhere I had been avoiding for 5 years. On the drive home from the Whitcomb estate, I thought about Charles hiding an apology inside a car because he could not say it while he was alive. Then I thought about Elise. My wife. Her hospital bed. Her voice saying, "I let the things that matter rust." I pulled over at a gas station halfway back to Savannah. I sat in my truck, and I called my son. Jonah answered on the 4th ring. "Dad, is everything okay?" That hurt. The fact that my son only expected my call if something was wrong. "No," I said, "but I want it to be." There was silence. I gripped the phone. "I'm sorry," I said. "After your mother died, I disappeared into work. I left you alone in your grief because I did not know how to stand inside mine. That was not fair. You deserved a father who talked to you, not a man who only paid tuition and fixed engines." Jonah did not answer for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was not steady. "I've been waiting for you to say that." I closed my eyes. I know. We talked for 2 hours. At one point, he laughed. At one point, I cried and pretended it was static even though both of us knew it was not. Next month, he is coming to the shop. We found an old Mustang shell to rebuild together. Nothing expensive. Nothing rare. Just a car that needs time, hands, and two men willing to stay in the same room long enough to stop pretending silence is peace. That is what the Bentley taught me. Not that rich people can be wrong. I already knew that. Not that old machines hold secrets. I knew that too. It taught me that the hardest repairs are rarely under the hood. They are the phone calls we do not make, the apologies we delay, the pride we polish until it looks like dignity. Charles Whitcomb waited until death to say what mattered. He hid his love inside a machine and trusted a stranger to carry it. I was luckier. My son was still alive. My phone still worked, and the distance between us was only one call wide. So let me ask you this. Is there someone you have been meaning to call? A child? A parent? A friend? Someone who is still here, still reachable, still waiting somewhere on the other end of a silence you keep pretending is too old to fix? If there is, what exactly are you waiting for? Because some engines can sleep for 7 years and still come back with the right hands. But people are not engines, and not every silence gives you that much time.